My family left my 18-year-old daughter, Rose, stranded in a country where you're advised not to travel without her passport. I can't even begin to describe how surreal that moment was when my nephew chuckled about it, finding it somehow hilarious. His sister joined in, talking about Rose's expression as if it was some kind of joke. I didn't yell or scream, though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I took a deep breath and started making plans. By the next morning, I had resort security knocking on their door. When they finally appeared in the lobby, I had to do a double take. There they all were, my parents, my sister Kendra, and her two kids, Max and Savannah, chatting away as if they were just out for a leisurely vacation. But there was someone missing. Rose wasn't with them. I scanned the area, hoping maybe she was trailing behind. Maybe she'd stopped for a drink or to use the restroom. But as I looked around, nobody seemed to even notice her absence. Darius, my husband, was standing beside me, and I felt him shifting uneasily. He noticed it too. I couldn't hold back any longer and asked, "Where's Rose?" It sounded sharper than I meant it to, but there was something in me that had already turned cold. Dad didn't even pause. He just kept walking. "She's probably on the next flight," he said, as if that was supposed to reassure me. I echoed his words, not quite believing them. Mom just waved it off casually. She said Rose lost her passport during a layover and was sorting it out. There was a tightening in my chest, a kind of premonition that things were far more serious than they were letting on. I tried to maintain a level tone, asking where exactly she lost it. "In London," I guessed, but there was a pause that made my stomach drop. Then Dad said, "Not quite," and Darius turned to them, pressing for more information. "What do you mean, not quite?" he asked. Mom shrugged it off, explaining that their original flight was canceled, but Dad found a new route with 2 layovers that saved them a fortune. She spoke as if it was a brilliant move. Dad proudly added that they got compensated for the canceled flight, and that rerouting through Sudan was quicker and cheaper. It was a win-win, according to him. Darius blinked in disbelief. Sudan, I couldn't believe it. I turned to face them fully, trying to process what they'd just said. They rerouted through Sudan, and Dad just shrugged again, talking about how there were plenty of open seats and, again, how they came out ahead with the compensation. I asked one more time, hoping I was wrong, where exactly did she lose the passport? And Dad confirmed it, in Sudan. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I scanned each face, hoping for some sign that this was a terrible joke. But there was nothing. Kendra looked bored. Savannah was engrossed in her phone, and Max nudged his sister, laughing as he recalled Rose's reaction when she realized what had happened. He said it was priceless, and Savannah laughed, describing how Rose panicked. Max even mentioned he wished he'd recorded it, comparing her to a victim on a prank show. I stared at them, trying to comprehend what shocked me more, their words or the casual, amused tone they used, as if they hadn't just abandoned someone in a dire situation. I barely managed to whisper, "You left her." It was almost a plea for them to deny it, to say it wasn't true. But Mom just folded her arms and said, "They didn't leave her, she lost her passport." Dad added, "She's 18. She's not a child." Kendra rolled her eyes at me, saying I was blowing things out of proportion, that Rose said she would handle it. I wanted to make sure I understood correctly, so I repeated it back to them. "My daughter lost her passport in a high-risk area, and you all just left her alone?" Mom insisted that Rose was smart, and I've always said that about her. Darius stepped up then, his voice calm, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He asked why none of them stayed with her, why not one adult stayed behind and missed the flight. Dad looked genuinely puzzled, as if he couldn't comprehend what else they were supposed to do. "We're already here," he said. "What else were we supposed to do?" And that was the moment I realized how deep the disconnect was, how they saw the situation as just another travel hiccup, rather than the serious issue it was. Sitting here in front of this camera, I never thought I'd be laying all of this out like this. But I guess sometimes you reach a point where you just have to let it all out, you know? It's like I've been holding on to this weight for so long, and it's about time I just release it. So here's what happened. We were at the airport, right? And everything was fine until it wasn't. Suddenly, we couldn't reach her. My mom and I, we tried calling, but it just went to voicemail. Darius, my husband, he tried too. Same thing, nothing. Mom thought maybe her phone died, which seemed logical at the time. But then we had this sinking feeling. I mean, she was alone in Sudan, of all places, with no passport, no contact, no embassy. And honestly, I don't know what we were thinking, assuming she'd be okay. She had always been strong, independent, but this was different. She was in a country we barely knew, and it was like, in that moment, everything just hit me. We left her there thinking she'd be fine, assuming she'd handle it, but she was alone. And then Savannah. She finally looked up, and it was like she was confirming everything I had been dreading. She didn't even want to go through Sudan in the first place. She kept saying it wasn't safe, especially for women, and she was right. But we had insisted, rerouting her travel plans like it was no big deal. Max, he just scoffed, called her a baby. And I looked at him, not quite believing what I was hearing. He said she fit in better there, like because her dad's black, she belonged more than we did. It was like a punch to the gut. Darius was right beside me, and I could feel him tense up. Kendra tried to smooth things over, saying Max didn't mean it that way, but the damage was done. Max didn't see it like we did. He thought she was making a big deal over nothing. I just stared at him, then at Kendra, then at my parents, and something inside me just cracked. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, but it was there. Like a joint slipping out of socket, painful but so quiet that no one really noticed. I turned to Darius and told him we'd fix this. My voice was steady. I wasn't scared, not yet. That would come later, but right then I was determined. Darius nodded, already looking up flights on his phone. Mom called after us, telling us not to make a scene, but I wasn't making a scene. Not yet. That would come later. I've spent so much of my life trying to earn decency from people who only ever offered me conditions. Growing up, Kendra could do no wrong. She could have set the house on fire, and my parents would have just shrugged it off as her being expressive. Meanwhile, I got punished for the smallest things, like asking what Bioa meant during dinner. Apparently, that was me being smug. And you'd think growing up would change things, but no. Kendra's glow-up just carried on into motherhood. She had Max and Savannah, and suddenly she was the heroic single mom who did her best, even when she let them eat junk for dinner or yelled at a cashier. Mom would just whisper about how hard parenting was. Meanwhile, when Rose was 4, she cried at a birthday party because she didn't want to hit the piñata. My dad said she was too sensitive, said I had to toughen her up. By high school, Rose was winning awards, making the honor roll, championing the math club, even winning a citywide science grant at 17. And yet, every achievement was met with a redirection. That's great, Mom would say, but you don't want to be just academic. Try a sport too, like basketball. Basketball for a kid who's 5'2" with asthma and coordination issues. And my personal favorite, being smart is good, but being well-rounded is better. This, from the same people who framed Max's first macaroni craft like it was a masterpiece. They always said she was mature for her age, but it came with conditions. She was expected to brush off everything, laugh off backhanded compliments, absorb the comments about her hair or her voice. Darius, her father, used to say we were imagining things, that maybe it wasn't racism, just generational blindness, that we couldn't prove intent. And I clung to that for years, desperately wanting to believe it. Looking back, I realize how blind I was. I thought if we showed enough kindness, if we were gracious and generous, they would see Rose for who she truly is. I hoped they'd love her once they really saw her. That's why I paid for the entire vacation. Every bit of it. The hotel, the meals, the excursions, even the flights. It was my idea, a celebration of a milestone in our business, Darius and mine. A foolish attempt to bring everyone closer together, but I should have seen it coming when Rose didn't show up at the resort. I asked everyone to search their bags, just in case. I suggested that maybe her passport had slipped into someone else's luggage at security or got stuck behind a tray table. Kendra rolled her eyes at me, and I could feel the skepticism in the air. She said, "You think we hid it?" And I answered carefully, trying not to accuse anyone. I said that if there was even a small chance it got packed by mistake, it was worth checking. They resisted, acted like I was accusing them of something terrible. Dad even said, "We're not the enemy here." But when I kept insisting, the atmosphere shifted. Max, Kendra's 11-year-old, couldn't meet my gaze. Savannah seemed like she was holding back laughter. Then Kendra blurted out, "It was already too late. What were we supposed to do?" I turned to her, confused. She froze mid-sentence, and Dad jumped in to cover up. The point is, none of this was planned. Darius stepped in, asking, "What exactly do you mean by too late?" No one answered, so I said it out loud. "You found her passport." Silence filled the room. My pulse pounded in my ears. I said it again, knowing the truth. They found it after she couldn't board. No one spoke. Savannah leaned back on the couch, almost like she was enjoying a show. Max looked like he wished he could disappear. It was Max who finally broke the silence. He mumbled that he hid it as a joke, said she was being annoying, talking about how Sudan was dangerous and we might get kidnapped. He thought she needed to relax. My mouth went dry. Rose had told them it wasn't safe. Max nodded and said she kept looking up information and warning them. It was getting on their nerves. Like they got it. It wasn't Disneyland. I turned to my parents. "And you all knew this." Mom waved it off, said they thought she was being dramatic as always. Darius cut in, his voice low and tight. "She's not dramatic. She's cautious. She's smart. She's 18, and you left her without a passport." "And now you're calling her dramatic?" Dad replied flatly. "She could have gone to the embassy." I snapped back that there's no U.S. embassy in Sudan. She probably realized that after they'd left her. Kendra just rolled her eyes and said, "She's legally an adult. What were we supposed to do? Cancel the whole trip because she was being difficult?" Darius and I echoed each other. Yes. That's exactly what they should have done. Silence again. Then Max added, like he was trying to help, "You should have seen her face when she realized. It was hilarious." Savannah nodded, saying Rose looked like she was about to cry. Darius stepped between me and them, like he thought he needed to physically hold me back. My nails were digging into my palms, every part of me screaming to throw something, my words, a lamp, anything. But I didn't scream. I just said quietly, "She's not dramatic. You're just cruel." And then I walked out because if I stayed, I was going to destroy something. They think it's over. That she'll be fine. That we'll just move on like it was some unfortunate mix-up. But it wasn't. It was intentional. It was mean, and they're going to regret it. The moment we confirmed Rose's passport was in. When I first heard about Kendra's bag, I just stopped listening. Not because I wasn't shocked. I definitely was. But because I was already moving. Darius was still staring at the bag as if it had transformed into something terrifying. "They found it before boarding," he said quietly. They knew. They knew she didn't have it, and they left her anyway. I didn't need to respond. Instead, I turned and headed directly back to the hotel room. I could feel the urgency in my steps. Every moment mattered. Once in the suite, I immediately grabbed my laptop, logged onto the airline site, and began looking for flights to Khartoum. There was one available, leaving in 5 hours. Was it risky? Absolutely. But it wasn't as risky as leaving our daughter alone overnight in a place marked as a do not travel zone. No identification, no adult with her, no U.S. embassy, and up until now, no way to reach us. Darius leaned over my shoulder, suggesting he should go, already reaching for his wallet. I didn't argue. He was right. Sudan was not a safe environment for a young Black woman on her own, but it wasn't much safer for me either, especially considering someone needed to manage the situation from here. We booked a one-way flight for him and 2 return tickets for the following morning. One for him, one for Rose. Time was slipping away. He needed to leave soon to make it through check-in, and we still hadn't heard from her. I had tried her phone countless times. Each attempt met with an unavailable signal. No voicemail, just a haunting silence. Call after call, it felt like a desperate ritual. On the 9th try, while refreshing the airline confirmation page, I heard it ring. Then again. Then, "Mom," and I almost dropped the phone. "Rose, oh my God, Rose, are you okay?" Her breath was shaky on the other end. "I've been trying to call. Nothing was working. The Wi-Fi is horrible. My SIM won't connect. I couldn't get anything to load." I was starting to think something was wrong with my phone. No, everything's okay now. "I found your passport," I said quickly. "I'll explain it later. What's important is that Dad's coming to you tonight. He's flying out in a few hours. He's bringing it." There was silence, then quietly she said, "You found it." I closed my eyes, feeling a mix of relief and anguish. "Yeah, in Kendra's bag." Another silence followed by a sound I'll never forget. A small, broken exhale that seemed to carry disbelief and grief together. "It wasn't lost." Then she said, "I knew it. I told them I had it. I told them not to reroute through Sudan. I told them this would happen. I know," I replied. "I believe you." She didn't cry, not really, but her voice cracked when she added, "They said I was being dramatic, that I watched too much TikTok, that airports are just airports." But the staff didn't even want us there. It wasn't even on the rebooking list. At first, Grandpa made a scene, and then suddenly it was an option. "Of course, he did," I muttered under my breath. I tried to tell them it wasn't safe, but they laughed. Then Max said I was freaking everyone out and should just go cool off, and then I couldn't find my passport. I leaned against the desk, gripping it so hard my knuckles turned white. "You're in the airport now, though," I asked to reassure myself. "Yeah, still in the terminal. They almost forced me to leave earlier." I pretended I was waiting for someone, found a food stall, and sat down. I haven't moved. It's loud, gross, and just weird. Some guy asked if I was married. My stomach twisted, and another one offered to help me out if I owed him a favor. That was it for me. I pulled the laptop closer, opened the hotel reservation portal. I could hear Darius packing, the sound of the suitcase zipper was clear, and I was done waiting. "Dad's on his way, Rose. Just hang in there. He'll be at the airport tomorrow morning. You'll see him. Just stay put. Don't show you're alone. Don't talk to anyone else." Strange how everything can change in an instant. I spent months planning what was supposed to be a perfect family vacation. I thought it would bring us all closer, a chance to reconnect and make some happy memories together. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. You think you know your family, but sometimes they surprise you in ways you never imagined. I booked the suites, the family block, and everything seemed set for a wonderful trip. But then, in a blink, it all crumbled. There was this moment when I sat there, just listening to the hum of the mini fridge in the hotel room, the rage buzzing in my ears. It was paralyzing, like a wave crashing over me, and then I knew what I had to do. I opened the hotel group reservation page and started clicking through. Each click was a decision, a step towards reclaiming control. Our suite, Kendra's suite, my parents' rooms. I canceled them all, every last booking. It felt like the only way to make sense of the chaos they had caused. If they could leave my daughter stranded, they could figure out how to get home themselves. When Darius came out of the bathroom, he asked if she sounded okay. He meant my daughter, of course. I told him she was holding it together, but scared. His face tightened and he nodded. He knew. He saw the reservation page on my screen and asked if I needed help. I shook my head. This was something I had to do myself. By the time he zipped his bag and kissed me goodbye, I had moved on to the return flight portal. I was done with generosity. If they thought it was funny to watch my daughter panic, then they could experience a taste of discomfort themselves. Let them find their way back with 3 layovers, no legroom, and no snacks. Some might call it petty, but they weren't the ones with a daughter alone in a dangerous foreign country, begging strangers for Wi-Fi. Darius and Rose were due back that evening, and my heart had been racing ever since he boarded that plane. I spent the night tracking their flight, refreshing the screen so often that my thumb ached. I didn't sleep a wink. By morning, I was running on nothing but caffeine and cold fury. That's when I heard the knocking. It wasn't just any knocking, it echoed through the hotel hallway, angry and demanding attention. It was coming from 2 doors down, from my family's rooms. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard someone shout about having children and how unfair it was. The hotel staff calmly explained their booking had been canceled, and if they didn't leave voluntarily, authorities would be called. I retreated back into my room, not to block it out, but to stop myself from laughing out loud. They had tried to spin the story the night before. My dad pounded on my door like I owed him something, while my mom tried her best, disappointed look. But to me, they had already left the moment they abandoned my daughter. Her passport, hidden in one of their bags like some sick joke. That was the line they crossed, and there was no coming back from that. It wasn't just a mistake, it was sabotage. The night before, they had come to my door, stomping around with their matching temper tantrums. My mom knocked so hard it rattled the lock. I opened the door just enough to see them when I said no. My mom accused me of canceling their rooms without telling them. I let the front desk break the news. Kendra, arms folded, said it was cruel even for me, but I just blinked at her. Cruel. Cruel was rerouting my daughter through Sudan and abandoning her in a transit zone. My dad tried to say she lost her passport, but I knew better. Max took it, they found it, and said nothing. So no, I wasn't paying for their mistakes. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It started off like any other vacation morning, but the tension was palpable. My family, bless them, always had a knack for turning a simple getaway into a complex web of drama. I stood there, watching my mom and sister Kendra, trying to mask their frustration with forced smiles. It was almost comical, really. They were expecting me to back down, to fold under their pressure as I had done countless times before. But this time was different. I had reached my breaking point. I was done playing the peacekeeper. I had stopped funding the trip, and they were not pleased. My mom, with that familiar look of disapproval, tried to make me feel guilty, reminding me that the kids were upset. Savannah was crying, and Max was scared. They were trying to paint me as the villain, but I wasn't having it. I stood my ground, letting them know they were free to make their own decisions, even if that meant moving hotels or paying for their own rooms. It was a hard stance, but necessary. I couldn't believe Kendra's audacity. She acted as if this was just one little mistake, like a minor oversight. But I couldn't let it slide. They had rerouted my daughter, Rose, through a high-risk country just to save money. Not only that, but Max had taken her passport, leaving her stranded and vulnerable. It was reckless and irresponsible. And then, instead of showing any remorse, they had the nerve to mock her. It was a betrayal I couldn't forgive. I told them the conversation was over and returned to the comfort of my quiet room, trying to find some peace amidst the chaos. Even through the thin walls, I could hear the arguments outside. The hotel manager was trying to handle the situation, and my dad was shouting, trying to assert control as he often did. It was a familiar scene, one that I had witnessed too many times. The mention of a lawsuit floated through the air, and I couldn't help but stifle a laugh. It was so typical of them to react with threats instead of introspection. Eventually, the noise died down, and I was left with my thoughts, wondering if I had done the right thing. Later that day, I checked the family group chat. Savannah had sent a message complaining about the new place they had moved to. It was like a bad review of a cheap motel, no air conditioning, the beach miles away. They wanted to come back, but I couldn't let them. I muted the chat, unwilling to engage in their blame shifting. Of course, they tried to spin the story to the rest of the family, painting it as a misunderstanding. Messages came in from aunts and cousins, all wanting to know what had happened. I replied with the plain truth. No sugarcoating, no embellishments, just the facts. Rose had been rerouted through Sudan, her passport taken by Max, and she was left behind. The silence that followed was telling. One aunt simply replied with, "Oh," and never followed up. It was a stark reminder that the truth, when laid bare, has a way of silencing even the most vocal critics. When Darius and Rose returned that evening, I was waiting for them in the lobby. Seeing Rose again was a bittersweet moment. She looked the same, yet something had changed in her eyes. I hugged her tightly, feeling a surge of relief. She whispered, asking if we had to go anywhere else, and I assured her we didn't. We extended our stay, just the three of us, seeking solace in each other's company. We spent our days enjoying the simple pleasures of life, eating fresh seafood by the ocean, swimming in crystal clear water. Rose found peace in reading under the sun, while Darius comforted me whenever a new message alert made me flinch. I ignored every attempt to contact me. It was a small rebellion, but it felt liberating. Returning home, I made a decision that had been a long time coming. I cut off all financial support to my family. There was no dramatic announcement, no confrontational message. I simply stopped. They reached out a few times, using guilt and passive aggression as their tools of choice, but I remained firm. When tax season rolled around and my mom inquired about the insurance payments, I responded with a simple, "No, we're not." The silence that followed was deafening, but it was a silence filled with newfound freedom. I confided in Darius about the guilt that still lingered, and he offered me a perspective that resonated deeply. He said guilt was the echo of boundaries that should have been set long ago. He was right. I had finally stood up for myself without raising my voice, and it felt empowering. Reflecting on it all, I wondered if I had overreacted. Maybe canceling their hotel and flights was a bit petty, but perhaps it was the only way they would ever understand a fraction of what Rose had endured. I was left with a question that I couldn't shake off. Was I justified in pulling the plug on their trip, or did I take it too far? I was genuinely interested in hearing other perspectives, in understanding whether my actions were warranted. If nothing else, this experience taught me the power of boundaries and the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult.